my children until I am fully convinced. And also I teach communication, and I teach that you pay attention to what people say. So if a doctor says there are no risks, you know that that cannot be true, because everything has risks attached, right? Even the simplest procedure has a risk attached. Mm-hmm. So you know right away that maybe that doctor is not for you.
That's right. So this is a good time for a break. You're listening to Your Family's Health on the Voice of Nassau Community College at 90.3 WHPC. This is to Dr. Janine Cook-Garrard, and we are talking to Dr. Janet Farrell-Leontief about her book, Gaslighting in Medicine. So we'll be back after the short break.
This is Mario Andretti. You know me as a race car driver, but I'm also a Meals on Wheels volunteer. I've raced against the sport's biggest personalities, but I've never met more vibrant, amazing people than the seniors served by Meals on Wheels. As a volunteer, you deliver a hot, nutritious meal and a friendly hello to someone just like your mother, grandfather, or next-door neighbor. These seniors are inspiring people with incredible stories to share, and they love to see you. The smiles you get back are priceless. Delivering with Meals on Wheels is easy, and you don't have to drive like me for it to be quick. You can volunteer your lunch break once a week or just once a month. With 1 in 6 seniors facing hunger and many more living in isolation, your lunch break can make a real difference. So, America, let's do lunch. Volunteer your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
This message brought to you by Meals on Wheels America and the Ad Council.
90.3 WHPC.
Welcome back to Your Family's Health. This is Dr. Janine Cook-Garrard, and I'm here with Shannon Scanapiego. And welcome back our guest, Dr. Janet Leontief. We're picking up from where we left off with regard to talking about the book, Gaslighting in Medicine. So Shannon has a question for you, Dr. Leontief.
What can patients do about this?
Well, as we said before, is that I think the patient needs to ask questions. And I also think that, and this is part of what I teach here at Nassau, is that, like the author and the writer, Maya Angelou, said, when people show you who they are, believe them. So like I said before with the example of the doctor who says there are no risks, to really stop and understand what is the doctor constructing by saying that, and maybe thinking that maybe that's not the doctor for you, and asking your own questions. And sometimes it's the idea of even asking the doctor, what am I not asking? Mm-hmm. What do you think that needs to be addressed? Even just that as an opening, right, in terms of a conversation between you and your doctor. And I wanted to speak before about, doctors are not intentionally doing this. And I think, and I wanted to speak about an article that I read that I write about in my book, is that I think doctors are trained to do this. And that's the whole point, is doctors go through a training process. And there was an article in the Atlantic magazine, and it was about medical students, and they identified aspects of medical culture that make medical school toxic for them. So they identified a couple of features of medical culture, and when I read this, I thought that those examples were examples of them being gaslighted. They participate within that, and then I don't think that they're aware that once they come out of medical school, they recreate that for the patient. Like, for instance, one of the features that the students complain about is that they are seen as interchangeable units, and they kind of lose their identity as people. And they're called the med student, for instance. Hey, you med student. Well, when I'm in a hospital or even a doctor's office with my son, we are seen as interchangeable units. So in a medical setting, here I'm known as Dr. Farrell Leon to you. And in his life, he's known as Andreas. That's his name. But within a medical setting, frequently I'm Mom and he's Buddy. Now, I think people have been trained to do that. I think they're following instruction when they do that. I don't think it's good because it is. It looks like it's intimacy or it looks like it's interpersonal connection, but it's not. It's impersonal. If you take away my name and you take away his name, you take away that which is most essential to us. And for one, I don't like being called Mom by people who are not my children. I see it as disrespectful. But I think that's the way in which they're trained. So what I was saying before about medical students is they receive that and they don't like it. But I think when they come out of medical school, they perpetuate some of the features of medical culture that they were exposed to in medical school.
So this may be a way of intellectualizing the approach to patient care as opposed to having more of an empathetic approach where you may call a patient dear or call them Mom, as you say, and talk about the systematic approach rather than talk to the feelings and personal experience of the individual.
I think this. I think if you put respect of the patient at the center of everything, I think that would be a transformational idea. And the word respect means to see. It means I see you and I engage with you as a person. So, for instance, you can ask the person, what would you like for me to call you? That seems like a very basic kind of thing. See, I see that as basic.
It is very basic.
That's basic decency. It's never happened.
I think we learned that in 101.
Yeah, we learned that in nursing school. We learned that in terms of communication, building that interpersonal relationship with the patient so that we are sensitive and, again, have that empathetic approach where you're not just talking at the patient and you're not talking at the patient, you're talking to the needs of the patient. And the patient is the center of the communication in the team of doctors, the team of nurses, the healthcare team. The patient should always be center. So I do understand that.
And I think this was one of the features that the interns also acknowledge, that they're told that the center is the patient, but in practice that's not what happens.
So it brings me back to that question. When you talk about communication, we need to, as patients and healthcare team, whether it be the physician and the nurse, we need to effectively communicate because this is going to help and going to improve healthcare outcomes. And so what you're saying is very, very important that not just the physician, but also just the healthcare team at large begin to have a different approach and communicate more effectively to patient, listening to the patient rather than talking to and at, if you will, the patient.
And see, I think like every good communication, I mean, this is what surprises me is because now, since the publication of my first book on medical communication, there's a span of time of 7 years, and communication has become much more of a topic that's addressed more frequently in medical school than it used to be.
Oh, yes.
But the type of communication that is being taught doesn't get to the heart of some of the things that I'm talking about. So if you teach communication as a skill, for instance, that's not what I'm talking about. And I think communication is a lot more than a skill. I think it's something really profound that is happening with us. And so if you don't understand that, or you're being exposed to communication as a skill, I think it's also going to backfire. If you've been trained in communication as a skill, for instance, you're trained, if you come into the room and the mother has just spent the evening sleeping next to her child who's in the hospital, you've been instructed to inquire about the mother's night. If you're doing that because you've been trained to do that as a skill, the mother is going to pick that up because the intention is not there. You're only doing it because it's a checklist.
Right.
And that's going to explode on you. And I think so much of this about communication is truly other-centered. Other-centered. It's about the other person, not you. So I can't tell you, for instance, of being in a hospital with my child and how people would barge into a room that's disrespectful, that's not other-centered, I had one doctor wake me up. I was sleeping next to my child. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. She woke me up because she wanted to ask me some questions about medical history. I threw her out of my room because she's operating on her time, and she's looking over and she says, I have some questions to ask. So she comes into the room. Now, see, that's what I mean of being gaslighted, right? That makes, at the time, until I sort of worked it all out, am I the crazy one here? It's 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Why is she doing that? Just barging into a room. I had a lot of people who would barge into my son's room very loudly with, "Hey, buddy." He was there for cluster seizures. The startle induced a seizure because it scared him. It was doctor induced, and it was from thoughtlessness of, again, maybe the way in which you're trained. You come in all peppy and happy and, "Hey, buddy." No, you don't. You have to read the situation. You don't always do the same thing, because then that's making communication into an empty technique, and then we're robots. We're not going to be able to respond to each other. And this is what I think in medicine is that it's already suffering. Right? It's already suffering. And the way in which I write about it is, this is needless suffering. This is taking the suffering and making it worse. And I've just seen that way too many times.
As a practitioner myself, I think about this and how we communicate, and as Shannon knows, that's one of the things that we teach early on.
Yes.
And I know that they are doing this in med school, where they're starting to put communication in the curriculum, where bedside manner, if you will, is the focus, where it's more of an empathetic approach. But I think that your book really touches on your lived experience.
It does.
And I think that a lot of the listening audience have probably had similar experiences. So have you found a physician that you can connect with?
Oh, yes.
You have?
Yes. And I more than one, actually.
Good.
And see, and the way in which I talk about them, and I do this in my first book, is I have found doctors who go against the culture that have trained them, and they are exceptional doctors. So they are amazing human beings, and I have found a couple of them, and those are the people we see.
Tell me, how can we get to your book? How do we find your book?
Well, this most recent book has not yet been published.
Okay.
But the other book is called What Do the Doctors Say? And the subtitle is How Doctors Create a World Through Their Words. And that's available either through my website. You could contact me there, JanetFarrellLeontiud.com. And it's also available on Amazon.
Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
In closing, we wanted to thank our guest, Dr. Janet Farrell Leontiud, for being with us today. And we want to thank you for listening to Your Family's Health.